Hey guys, STLYoungblood with you, and I'm creating a new setup here using the air hammer. And if you've been with my channel for a long time, you've seen me do a couple different videos about the air hammer. And some of those have been talking about how ridiculous and almost novelty type weapon it actually is. Other videos have said that it's improving a little bit, and then finally I think I eventually said that it was borderline OP. Bottom line is this: it's changed in my opinion, it's changed in the game, and it's a pretty broad spectrum overall. But to me, the weapon almost seems like it's fallen to irrelevance over the last couple months. You know, when I'm playing my VS alt, my TR alt, I almost never run into a Reaver that's actually using the air hammer. When I'm playing as my NC main, I really rarely ever see a wingman or an ally using the air hammer either. I mean, it's out there, I see people using it occasionally, but it's far from the most common. So, I've been picking and testing new setups to kind of help pass the time and to really just kind of re-energize myself getting back into the flying scene. Occasionally I do find a certain staleness in it, but I find that I can overcome that by really trying something new. And while I was trying to pick something to work on, I saw the old dusty air hammer just sitting around at its footlocker after not being used so long, and I decided it was time to re-equip it and to give it a new setup that I felt best suited its role. Now, before I get into this, I want to kind of do a quick disclaimer, and basically that's, I'm not sure what the community thinks of the air hammer. You know, it's been a novelty weapon before, it's been OP before. So I don't want people to think that I'm coming out and saying that this is going to be your new MLG Pro setup. I'm not saying anything of the sort. I'm building a new setup that highlights the abilities of this weapon. Part of the reason for this disclaimer is I clearly hit a chord when I did my Coyotes video. I didn't explicitly mention that it was an easy mode setup. Well, frankly, I've said way too many times in my videos that I really don't agree with the lock-on mechanics in the game anyways. I'm not a fan of them, so hopefully you all know that I'm not a lock-on fan. Bottom line is this: I don't want to feel like I have to put these disclaimers out there. Take it for what it's worth, but part of the reason I'm doing these videos is to give everybody a little bit more variety. I think we've seen for probably way too long that the MLG Pro setup is the external afterburner tanks with the rotary because that's what highlights the pilot's skill the best. And guess what? I don't disagree with that at all. You know, and I think everybody's played with that setup. But we're trying to do something new here. And what's going to highlight this role best is actually putting this weapon into its intended role. There's always a lot of animosity out there when it comes to the ESF, so it's never going to be easy to make anyone happy. But bottom line with the air hammer is, it's extremely effective in the right situations and extremely ineffective when out of its best roles. And this is going to be an anti-ground setup that doesn't involve rocket pods, so I hope everybody's happy with this, but I'm never going to make everybody happy. So with that being said, let's go ahead and just jump into the new air hammer setup, which I'm calling Hammer Time. Real effective, I know, but it makes me smile, and that's what's important. So before we get into the specifics of it all, the overall purpose of this build is to really support your infantry on the ground by giving that close air support. You're going to be a dedicated air-to-infantry killer, and some of that's going to read, and I'm sure some people are going to read that as being a farmer, but whatever. And this is going to help keep the enemies away from the point, or maybe it's going to be keeping the point clear so your team can move forward. You're supporting your ground troops. Now, the hammer gives you a decent effectiveness against enemy armor overall, but that's really not going to be your forte. So, knowing the purpose of this build, here's how we're going to kit it out for that close support role. Now, if you even want to be moderately effective in your air hammering adventures, the number one thing that you need to do is upgrade your magazine size. Starting with 3 rounds in the magazine is just flat out not really going to work for you. Now, I've got mine upgraded to about 6 right now. Moving it up to the max rank of 7 gets kind of expensive. But if I keep playing this class like I think I probably will, then I'll probably bump it up to 7 anyways. So you can be really effective with 6, and really 5 is a hell of a lot better than the default 3. But start upgrading that right away if you want to use this, because it's the single most important thing that you need. Now, second on the list of important things on the air hammer is going to be the thermal optics. You're going to be engaging infantry, and that's pretty much your specified role, and nothing's going to pick out the infantry from the terrain like thermals. And I wouldn't necessarily label it as a mandatory upgrade, but it's pretty damn close. And the final upgrade to the air hammer is going to be the ammo capacity overall. Don't necessarily feel like you need to sink a ton of certs into this, just because it's not necessary. You're not really spamming a ton of rounds while flying around. Overall, it's a pretty frugal weapon. I think I've got mine upgraded like 4 notches or so. So it's noticeable, but it's not necessarily required. Basically, throw some certs into it when you have it available. Now, when we start talking about the rest of this build, this is where your decisions are really going to start interacting with each other and really start to have an impact on each other. So, for example, I've chosen to use the external afterburner tanks as my wing mount on the Hammer Time build. Now, this is for a couple of reasons. The first of which is based on the utility that I feel is necessary, and that's the scout radar. I choose to use the scout radar because it's going to make picking out enemy targets a lot easier. I've got it upgraded to spotting targets out to 200 meters, and not only is that going to help net you more kills, but it's going to help support your ground troops, and that's part of the intended purpose of this build, and your team's going to be more prepared for what's coming. So think about your team holding a point and trying to cap it, and the enemies are starting to try and get it back. They'll be able to see where they're actually coming from. That being said, with us using the scout radar, we're really sacrificing the ability to use flares. And for me, that was a real bummer and something that was hard to do because, frankly, when you're engaging this close to enemies, you're a real target for lock-ons. And with the changes that have happened recently, when you're that close, lock-ons happen really quickly. So I felt that the added benefit of radar was well worth the risk. So we're going to use the external afterburner tanks on the wings. Now, if you can react quickly, the extra fuel that you're carrying was going to help you outrun most of the lock-ons when they happen. So your different parts are interacting with each other because without flares, you need the ability to outrun your locks. You also don't have the fire suppression to help repair you, and as such, you can really get to safety quicker to help help out and start repairing. The other reason that we're using external afterburner tanks is based on the primary weapon. The air hammer is a decent option when engaging enemy fighters. That being said, it's not really great overall based on its limits and the range, but up close, it is pretty effective. Now, with that in mind, if you're attacking or defending against a Mozzie or a Scythe, you're going to want to get up really close, close that gap a little bit, and the external afterburner tanks are going to help you significantly do that. You can really start to see how all the decisions that you make are really going to impact others down the line. Now, the last two slots are going to be your defensive slot and the performance airframe slot. Now, for the defensive selection, I choose to run Nanite Auto Repair. And the reason for this is that with the external afterburners on the setup, I can generally get away from trouble fast enough to allow the repairs to kick in. I also don't really want to have to land that close to enemy territory since we're really up near the front lines of this build. And I don't want to risk the random rocket or tank shell just blasting me while I'm trying to get my repairs in. Instead, I'd rather kind of find a cliff or a mountain or something that I can kind of just hover behind and get repaired and get back into the fight quickly. I personally don't feel that stealth or composite are great choices here either with this setup. Stealth can help you a little bit by increasing some of the lock-on times, but staying off the radar isn't going to be that big of a deal when you're flying right above everybody. Composite's going to help shield you from some flak, but really, again, flying this close to the enemy ground forces, if there's significant flak around, you shouldn't really be using this setup. You should probably pick a different kit or a different battle. And then finally, for the airframe, I chose hover. Now, the improved air brakes and hover stability really make getting that 1 or 2 shot kill on infantry a lot easier. You're a little bit more nimble and able to stop and turn quicker, and that agility is really crucial when it comes to engaging the tiny infantry that are running around. Dogfighting airframe should almost never be used, and the lack of the improved air brake on the Racer doesn't really make sense for the purpose of this build. So overall, hover is going to be your decision, or you should be your choice at least. So that's kind of your build. Some of the tips for using this kit effectively: don't hover in one place too long. You're close to the enemy, so you're going to be a real target for dumbfire rockets. Instead, kind of circle the battlefield or really make some strafing runs. If you're going to be taking on the tank with this setup, don't get too close to their barrel either. Attack from either straight above where they can't land shots, or try and sneak a bunch of shots onto their rear to do more damage. Take advantage of that. Just don't stay in that place too long. Bottom line is just be aware of who is looking and where. When you get locked onto, don't panic since you don't have the flares. Just make sure your thrusters are pointing forward and hit the afterburners to try and outrun it. If you notice that you've got 2 or more rockets following you, you could be in some trouble. Just know that you're going to need to get a little bit more evasive and use some mountains or buildings to break the lock. You might be able to outrun them both, but it's going to really be dependent on the situation, and you should probably be starting to look at the terrain to see if there's something you can use. If you're being engaged by an ESF, don't allow them to stay far away. Your worst nightmare with this kit is going to be a good pilot running something like the stock nose gun and Tomcats from a long distance away. The bottom line is you're never going to be, you're either going to need to return and haul ass, just get out of there, assuming that they don't have the afterburner tanks, which if they're using Tomcats, they won't. Or you're going to need to run straight at them, close the gap, and get into your stronger areas, which is that close quarters engagement. You're going to have to kind of make that decision, but those are your two options. You can't really just linger and engage at long ranges because they've got the weapons to do it and you don't. So there you have it. That's the Hammer Time setup. It's the air hammer with thermals, the improved magazine size, and ammo capacity. You're running the external afterburner tanks with scout radar, nanite auto repair, and the hover airframe. I would personally recommend that you throw on some sick-ass camo since you're going to be right in the enemy's face, so make sure you let them appreciate that. That's basically it for now. If you have any questions, let me know. If you guys want to suggest some loadouts, I'll be happy to test them and see what I think about them at some point, so feel free to put them in the comments. Other than that, if you like this, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you all later, and take care.